Hello there, World of Tankers. Welcome to the channel. I'm, of course, your host, Droodles, Blitz, and in today's video, we are going to be talking about this brand new Tier 8 Chinese Premium Medium Tank, the 122 TM. Now, this vehicle looks honestly fantastic. I've always liked the Chinese design. I think the WZ-111-5A looks amazing. I think the 113 looks really clean, and even the WZ-121. And this here, while it looks like a Tier 10 vehicle, it's actually a Tier 8 medium, and it's got some pretty impressive statistics going for it. Now, as this vehicle is currently going to be entering Super Test very shortly for World of Tanks Blitz, we don't actually have the stats for this vehicle on Blitz yet. So, if you wanted me to give you a solidified review of this tank, or preview should I say, unfortunately I can't really give that to you yet. But what I can give you is a rundown of what these statistics should be like when this vehicle is released, mobility, and everything else like that, judging off of how it is currently in World of Tanks PC. And man, wait until you see the armor profile of this vehicle. Now, once we break into the PC statistics, you'll notice, just like it says in the title of the tank, it carries a 120mm armament, which has a 400 damage per shot. Now, that's pretty beefy, especially when it comes to those Tier 8 Chinese mediums. We already have the T-34-2, we have the T-34-3, and unfortunately, while it's not named the T-34-4, it still does have that big beefy punch of a 120mm. Now what that means is that normally 120mm like the 34-2 and 34-3 have 175 pen. This vehicle, on at least PC, has 233mm of standard pen, and that would make it one of the highest penetration mediums in Tier 8. Not to mention the heat is 299mm of heat pen. That would mean with calibrated shells you're upwards of 330mm of pen. Now obviously I don't think Wargaming's going to do this for World of Tanks Blitz because that would be absolutely absurd, but I do think that it'll have about 250mm of base premium penetration, just like the other two vehicles, very comparable, do as well. Now the aiming time is 4.42 seconds, which isn't amazing, but I don't know if this is going to have that same Chinese instant aiming time like we have on the 34-2 and 34-3. What I can tell you is the dispersion is not amazing, but that is to be expected as it does have a very high alpha. So those are basically the gun statistics. Is very, very high penetration, but you'll notice 1430 DPM base is not amazing. Now when we go over to mobility, the tank is decently fast. It's not the fastest of mediums, but it goes 50 kilometers per hour with 580 horsepower. Now when we take a look at the power to weight ratio of 15.47 and we compare that to a Tier 10 heavy like the WZ-113, this vehicle has a power to weight of 18.3. So while the tank is a medium, it is not the fastest medium at that. On hard terrain, it's not even able to actually reach its top speed, only going up to 45.28 kilometers per hour. And on soft terrain, which is like water or, some sorts of sand, you're only going 23 kilometers per hour. So it's not the fastest of tanks. You'll probably average around 40 kilometers per hour, but that's really nothing amazing. The traverse speed as well is only 41 degrees a second. And when you compare that to some of the faster heavies, again, it's really not that mobile of a medium tank. So the question is, what does it play like? Well, wait until we break into the armor in just a moment. Now, it does carry 8 degrees of gun depression, and when we know that this is a Chinese/Russian design, usually these tanks only carry 6 or 5 degrees, especially because it is a medium, so that's something that's great. Now, the hull armor is 120mm, and what vehicles have 120mm hulls? Well, vehicles like the, I think actually the WZ-113 might have 120mm hull armor, and we can take a look really quickly. Now, the hull's 125, which is pretty comparable when you think about it, that this is a Tier 10 heavy with the same upper plate basically as a Tier 8 medium. So what is the armor like? Well, this is the T-34-3, which has a pretty thick upper plate. I mean, if you ever look at it, it's about 100mm thick. So you can see the upper plate armor is about 180mm thick, and the lower plate is 175, which is pretty good. The turret is very hard to cut through, as we all know in Blitz, and because of that, this vehicle, when it's using its gun depression, can actually make that upper plate about 234 thick, and if you're aiming at it with heat, about 250 thick, fully angled, and that's actually a pretty impressive upper plate. Until we take a look at this vehicle. Now, obviously, the T-34-3 does not have the best standard AP pen, but 250 heat pen, and It's exactly the same. Yes, that is right. The base upper plate armor is 225 because, as we said, it is a 120 millimeter plate. So instead of being about 190 as you saw on the T-34-3, it's up to 220. And when you're looking at that with base penetration from any heavy tank, that is some pretty impressive armor. And that turret, well, this is 250 heat pen, and the weakest spot on this turret is 300 millimeters thick. That would mean that you need over 300 millimeters of premium pen in a tier 8 vehicle to cut through this currently. Now again, I don't know how this is what Wargaming is going to end up balancing the vehicle on Blitz, because I very rarely have a distant opinion on Wargaming's probably not going to make the turret that thick. I mean, if they do, we're going to have some pretty big problems. Now, it does have weak spots, big cupola sticking out on the roof, but I mean, if this thing's using its 8 degrees of gun depression, you're looking at a 300 thick millimeter upper plate, and as well a 340 thick millimeter turret, and the only thing you can shoot is that, while a 400 damage per shot gun is aiming at you. Yeah, good luck. Now, the side armor on this vehicle as well is pretty solid. It's not amazing. I mean, you can see here, it's pretty weak. You're not going to be bouncing that many shells on the side if you over angle it. You can only get about a 20-degree angle. Anything over that, and yeah, so you got to be worried there, especially because the sides are only about 80 millimeters thick. But it does actually have some spaced armor on the upper part, which will get some troll bounces here, which is pretty solid. Now the rear is 50 millimeters thick, so nothing incredible there, and the rear of the turret is only 70 millimeters thick. But after looking at this tank's armor profile, I mean, you can very easily tell that this thing is literally thicker than tier 8 heavy tanks, let alone mediums. I mean, it's incredibly thick on that frontal armor. Just to put in comparison here, if we go over to tier 8 Chinese heavies and we get out a vehicle like the 112, you're going to see, sure, the 112's upper plate is very thick, but I mean, its armor profile doesn't even look that far-fetched from what is a medium tank that goes faster than it, has the exact same damage per shot, with way more penetration on the standard and heat, as you can see, 196 and 250. So I don't really know what to expect about this tank. It looks very, very cool. Now, a very comparable armor profile that we could look at would be more like the Type 59. Type 59, though, even with its 7 degrees of gun depression, is still about 215 thick, which means that this T22 is really, really strong. As you can see there, it's still only about 100 millimeter upper plate. So the strongest mediums currently in Blitz, which are vehicles like the T54 Mod 1, that is about as close as you're going to get to what the armor profile is actually going to be like. And I think the T54 Mod 1 is actually the same armor upper plate. If we take a look here, you'll notice exactly 120 millimeters. So that upper plate is basically the same. If we were to load heat, it's about 235, and using its 7 degrees of gun depression, it's upwards of 300. So you basically think of a T54 Mod 1 with an impenetrable turret and a 400 damage per shot gun with 230 millimeters of standard pen and 250 on the premium. I don't know how this vehicle is going to come in the game balanced. I have no clue. It looks really cool. I mean, personally, I think the tank looks amazing. But looks aside, I don't know how Wargaming is going to end up balancing it. Now, some good and, should I say, enlightening news about this vehicle is the fact that Wargaming has done a pretty good job balancing the latest vehicles brought into the game. The LT-432 in testing was probably the most broken vehicle I've ever seen statistically, and they balanced it out by nerfing it a couple times before it was actually released. The Turtle Mark 1 looked incredibly strong. Wargaming nerfed it, and while it's not a great tank, it's definitely pretty balanced, I would say. And that also goes for the TS5 and the Samwa SM. So, the good news is that I don't think this vehicle will come into the game absolutely balls glory blazing, but you never know, as this is Wargaming, and sometimes they like to make a little bit of money. We're going to find out in the near distant future, but personally, I think this tank looks amazing, and I'm very excited to see how it's going to be when it comes into the game. Let me know what you guys think about this tank in the comments down below, what it looks like, if you're excited for it, if you're going to be dropping your hard-earned cash on it. But I can tell you, expect it to be in crates, expect it to be in crates just like the LT-432, as that seems to be about the new norm for Wargaming. Hopefully, all of you enjoyed today's video. Just thought I'd share a little bit of news on this tank, how it's going to play, and everything else like that. So make sure to smash that subscribe button down below, and other than that, I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye!